Today we're talking about Heroes of the Storm. Quick apology for the microphone quality in advance, I'm still abroad, so that's gonna be fixed soon. What happened in Heroes of the Storm and why am I as a Smite channel talking about this? So basically, yesterday Blizzard somewhat cancelled the game. Not really, they cancelled the entire competitive scene and said they move a lot of developers from the game itself to other games, but it kinda sounds like there's only a bare bones team left on Heroes of the Storm. Obviously, as a result of that, some people may not want to stick with Heroes of the Storm in the future, and that's why I'm making a little bit of a transition guide to Smite, if you want to try that out. But let's begin with Blizzard's announcement here. So basically, they announced that they are canceling the competitive side and that they want to focus on other games instead. So they're moving some developers. It's not quite clear if they also fired some developers in the process, but I would kind of assume so. And they will not really have the same team for Heroes of the Storm anymore at this point. And it came as much of a surprise as there really wasn't any indication of this beforehand. And a lot of the competitive players were shocked. There was like a radio silence from the Heroes of the Storm team, especially on the Reddit for a few weeks before that. And now out of nowhere, they're just kind of canceling everything. They made a follow-up post kind of explaining things, giving out a message to the community, but essentially it's just giving you a heads up that there's not going to be as many changes and there's not going to be as much going on anymore. They will keep the game going with a core team of beloved employees, but it doesn't really sound very promising. It sounds like, hey guys, we don't, want to dumpster the game entirely and we're still going to work on it a little bit here and there, and it's a bit of a passion project of some people now, but not really what it was before. And who's to blame for that? Well, we could say Blizzard, but it's very likely that this is a decision of Activision Blizzard, or rather the Activision part, just wanting to make a cut here, because Blizzard isn't the kind of company to typically make those choices where do they just cut out an entire part of the company, whereas Activision is very known to just be after the money. And with them being merged now, that's just a very unfortunate circumstance overall, so to speak. And the outcome is that both fans of the game as well as the pros suffer for it. I still think that Heroes of the Storm is a fun game even at this point, and it may actually be kind of good for the game in a way, as in the developers can go a little more crazy with the next characters now, if there are any more characters to begin with. But at the same time, obviously, a lot of the hype aspect around the game is gone with this decision. While we don't have the most hype situation in Smite right now, it's at least going more stable. So let's talk about the differences between Heroes of the Storm and Smite at this point. First of all, I want to thank Super Deza and Valenise for providing me with a lot of extra information regarding this, because they both played the game a little bit more frequently than I did, and that way I was able to collect all the necessary information. So let's begin with the classes. The classes in Heroes of the Storm are Assassin, Warrior, Support, Specialist, and Multi-class. In Smite, we have the Assassin, Warrior, Guardian, Hunter, and Mage. They are not kind of one-to-one classes. So basically, the Assassin in Heroes of the Storm is somewhat of a hybrid or a mix of different classes in Smite. In Smite, you have the Mages and the Assassins and the Hunters, who all kind of, in a way, fulfill a damaging role. The Mages and Assassins do this mostly with Burst. With the Mages, it's magical damage. With the Assassins, it's physical damage. And you have the Hunters that do more damage over time, or like DPS, which are also physicals. Then the Warrior in Heroes of the Storm is more of a tank with self-sustain, which is typically more of an equivalent to the Guardian in Smite, though some of the Warriors are also somewhat self-sustain and tankiness focused, but the Warriors in Smite generally do a fair bit more damage. The support is kind of focused on healing and buffs, and there are not that many characters in Smite that do that. Two that come to mind are mages, being Hel and Aphrodite. There are a few others, but often they're a bit more mixed in their roles, and often the Guardians, for example, will have some healing utility. The Specialists are something we don't really have in Smite in that way. Obviously, there are guards that provide certain degrees of utility, but we have very few guards that are focused, for example, on structure pushing, and very few guys that can get back to lane quicker. Some examples that we have in Smite would, for example, be Loki, who's focused on split pushing, Bastet, who has got the tools to split push. We have Jing Wei, who has a very quick way back to lane. Janus, who is a god with a lot of portals in his ultimate as well as normal ability, so you can move around the map very differently and move your allies as well. And I guess to some degree, gods like Baron Samedi that have some team utility, could also fall under that, but at the same time, they could also be somewhere between a support and maybe even a warrior in terms of classification, also very much depending on how you level and play them. Smite doesn't have any multi-class characters, but we have Achilles, who can choose in base if he wants to wear his armor or not. And depending on that, will be tankier or more damage focused. And if you go with a build that goes along with that, you can kind of multi-class him in a way, though he's typically played with damage anyways. Also, the next god that's coming out, King Arthur, might actually be somewhat of a multi-class character between a very aggressive and more defensive character. It sounds a bit like that at the moment, but it's not 100% clear yet. The most important key difference between the games is probably the perspective, with the top-down view that you have in Heroes of the Storm, whereas Smite is the only third-person MOBA that actually survived to this day. I think this perspective obviously changes a lot of things about how you play, and it will definitely take a while getting used to, because it also comes with WASD controls instead of your normal controls, but it's something you can manage to adapt to, and if you're used to MOBAs in general, it will definitely be easier to get into Smite as well. Now let's talk about how you can get heroes, or gods rather, and how you can unlock things in chests, etc. You can still buy gods in Smite the same way that you buy heroes. You can buy them either through an in-game currency that you earn by playing the game, or you can buy them through a currency that you get for real money. But in Smite, you also have the option to go for the god pack. And to be honest, it's an amazing deal, and it's one of the best deals in the entire MOBA genre, because you can get the entire roster of gods in Smite for, depending on where you're from and what kind of currency you have, around $25-ish, $30-ish dollars. Sometimes this is even on sale, so this can get even cheaper, and I would not be surprised if in the context of Heroes of the Storm kind of being more or less cancelled, there would be another sale for that. So there are definitely opportunities to get it cheaper. You can wait for that, or you can just buy it, because it's still a very cheap deal overall, and it unlocks all characters forever, meaning all future characters as well. In terms of what else you can get, a lot of it are skins, a lot of it are also other customizations surrounding that. You have all kinds of gimmicks like jump stamps, fountain effects, and backing effects, and whatever you want. The kind of typical gimmicks you will see in a MOBA. And the majority of those can typically be found in chests, sometimes even more as a filler than as the actual content. The chests work a little bit differently in the sense that you can't reroll anything, and chests in Smite are typically themed. There's no rarity levels or anything, but rather you have a specific theme for the skins that are in the chest, and then most of the skins, if not all of the skins in that chest, kind of fit the theme. So you can't really roll for a specific character. Sometimes you can roll chests for a specific class in rare cases, and other than that, you're just kind of depending on whichever chest is currently coming out. It takes quite a while to even get close to the skin that you want if you are new to the game and you want to roll a chest, but there are often options to buy things directly as well. One that I personally like is a daily changing bundle for you personally that's completely randomized, which often contains the more rare skins if you have quite a few skins already, and that can be directly bought for a relatively cheap price compared to buying the skins individually. You also get some free stuff in Smite. You get stuff for daily logins, which is mostly just favor, and then gems at the end of the week, gems being the currency you normally have to pay for. You get some stuff while leveling up, and you also get some stuff for daily first wins, some chests that you can use, but I think it's only 4 per week maximum, though you can unlock more slots with favor and get more stuff if you already have all gods anyways and you don't need favor points for that anymore. So there are a few differences here. You still get a little bit of stuff for free. You have a little bit of stuff that you have to pay for, and then you can also pay a lot if you really want everything and you want to whale out completely. There's also some loot that you can get through watching Mixer sometimes, though that is usually around the Pro League times. Then the account levels work a little bit differently. They're not tied to the characters the same way as they are in Heroes of the Storm, and you just level up over time. The rewards are also just on the earlier levels for the most part. I think until level 30 you get regular rewards, and then afterwards it's just every milestone basically. So it's a little different, but not too different. A stat that is very different and important in Smite is movement speed. Many characters can buy multiple items with movement speed, and with the perspective being different, this can be very valuable. You shouldn't go overboard with this, but you should keep this in mind that it can really help that you can juke a lot of the abilities through just having a lot of movement speed and just being harder to hit overall. In Smite, you also cannot pre-pick your character. You have to type out your role instead, even though the draft mode in Ranked is somewhat similar. There are items in Smite, and the ability leveling works differently, like completely differently basically. In Smite, you can only level one ability on level 1, and the first time you can level your ultimate is on level 5. In this context, the level up is also tied to only you as a character and not your entire team. As such, you can often find your lane opponent leveling up and have to be very careful at that point because he may use his ultimate against you when you don't have yours yet, even though the other enemies on the team may not have their ultimates yet. You also have no way of seeing the enemy XP, so that makes things a little bit more complicated. The only thing that you have on level 1 aside of your ability that you level is your passive. This passive is, depending on the god, something very different, but in every case, it is completely passive. There is no passive in Smite that you can somehow activate unless it's through other abilities somehow. There are a few exceptions to the rule, obviously, when it comes to how many abilities characters start with, as some of the stance swapping characters already start with a stance swap along with their abilities, which generally makes them very strong level 1 characters. On top of that, you also have the items to keep track of that you can buy in the shop, and you will have to bag for that. So you will be backing generally a little bit more in Smite overall. And you also have relics and consumables. Relics are basically just additional effects or items that you can activate at any point. And the consumables are just something that you typically get in late game to get even more power when you have full items at that point and you just want to buff yourself up a little bit more. There are no fountains for self-sustain, so you end up generally backing a lot more, though some characters are kind of staying in lane as long as possible through self-sustain. And there's a single character, Chang'e, who can actually send her rabbit to base and buy items for her. Healers are generally not as needed in Smite. There are quite a few healers still, but they are not always used. There are many team comps that can function without them. You do not have mounts, and last hitting is a fair bit more necessary than Heroes of the Storm. And Heroes of the Storm, it's not necessary at all. In Smite, it's not super necessary, but it will give you higher rewards in most situations, unless you're using Guardian's Blessing, in which case you should probably not last hit at all. The structures overall are somewhat similar. You have towers in either case, and then you have a final structure at the end, which is the core, or in Smite's case, the Titan. The Titan can move around a little bit, but that's the biggest difference. The towers overall work a little bit differently though. I'm not going to go over a complete comparison here, I'm just going to tell you how the towers in Smite work. In Smite, if you go under a tower, it will aggro on you. Even if minions come in afterwards, the aggro stays on you. The only way to get rid of the aggro is walking out of the tower range. If minions walk in before you, then the tower will aggro the minions first. If, however, you attack an enemy under the tower, and by enemy I mean a god, then the tower will change their aggro to you. So you cannot just aggress to an enemy god under the tower for too long, as then you'll start taking more damage. And more damage is important here. The first shot of the tower doesn't do that much damage, but the damage scales up with every single shot. So the longer you stay on the tower, the more damage you'll take in a quicker time span. As such, you should probably get in and get out very quickly if you try to kill someone under the tower on early levels, and not do it at all too early in the game. A thing that makes this a little bit easier is the fact that you can actually see the tower aggro range. You also have no top and bottom lane in Smite. This should be self-explanatory. You have your left and your right lane, but depending on which side you're on, that obviously changes. So the lane names that you should be focusing on here are the duo and solo lane, or the long lane for duo and the short lane for solo. Short lane is where the towers are closer together. The characters in Smite are generally, in my opinion, a little bit less unique. You, for example, don't have anything as crazy as Cho'Gall, which is a bit unfortunate. They're a bit more cookie cutter overall, but there are still some interesting choices, like for example, the Morrigan, who can transform into other gods, if that's what you're looking for. The maps that exist in Smite are also quite different. You still have quite a few options, but there's no randomized rotation for the maps. Instead, you have Conquest as the main 5v5 mode, the main MOBA mode. You have a very highly populated arena mode, which is just about the fights basically, and a similarly popular 3v3 joust mode. And then there are various other modes that I'm not going to go into in detail here for basically every team size except 2v2. And then there's also the mode of the day, which is sometimes 2v2, but sometimes something completely different as well. It's kind of like the weekly brawl, but also a little bit different because they should at least be changing every day, although they don't actually do. In Conquest specifically, you have different objectives. I'm going to refer to my Conquest guide here. I'm going to link that here instead of talking about that all in detail in this video. But there are two main objectives. One is for gold, the other one is for a strong buff, and then many side objectives that all have their functionalities. In terms of the competitive scene, Smite has recently seen some changes, meaning that the entire league has been moved to North America. That is obviously not a great decision for many EU players, and a lot of players are not happy about that and are actually quitting at this point as well. So the esports development in Smite is not exactly rosy, but at the same time, HiRez has made this with some sort of plan at least, and they want people to just be more focused on the NA scene, have more hype around the NA scene, and have all games be played live in their own studio. So there's some purpose to the madness, I suppose. I still don't think it's the most agreeable choice, but at least the scene is still alive for now. Also, as a bonus benefit, you don't have to deal with Overwatch heroes in Smite. Now, if you're switching over to Smite, you may want to know what character in Smite is similar to a Heroes of the Storm character that you've played before. There's a website for that I'm going to link down below. I think it's not always accurate though. I see a ridiculous amount of Xingtian being compared to everything in Heroes of the Storm, for example. So I wouldn't say it's exactly always the best fit, but there's some nice information there. Outside of that, I have a few examples here where I'd like to thank Valenice, who's been bringing this up to me. So for example, you have Lieutenant Morales, who is very similar to Aphrodite in many ways. You can pick a target and only heal them, and you can give them various buffs and all that kind of stuff. And that's what the character basically revolves around. Alexstrasza is somewhat similar to Fafnir and Vamana, in the sense that they both have ultimates that reshape them, give them different effects on their abilities. Alexstrasza is visually a lot closer to Fafnir being a dragon though. Diablo is somewhere between Sobek and Hercules in terms of his control. He has his dash forward, which Sobek has as well, where he throws the enemy behind him, whereas Hercules throws enemies towards him and can dash forward and stun as well. So somewhat in between, though the rest of the kit is not exactly the same. Greymane in many ways plays a lot like Ullr. They both have a melee and a range stance. However, Greymane's ultimate is a little bit different and is actually somewhat closer to Achilles, who can reset his ultimate upon executing an enemy. So depending on which part of the kit you're after here, either of those may be a good fit. Samuro is at least visually somewhat close to Susanoo, having a katana, having a spinning hurricane ultimate, though Susanoo does not have the same decoy mechanics. On the other hand, he also has that amplified next basic, which is something that Hunbats has as well. Rexxar is somewhat close to Skadi or Hera, who both have their pets and control their pets, and their kits somewhat revolve around the pet while also having their own effects. Stitches and Sylvanus share a pull mechanic, though Sylvanus cannot pull his teammates and is otherwise a very supporty and healing focused characters. Gazlowe is somewhat similar to Vulcan in the sense that he has turrets as well, and maybe a little bit like Apuash, who throws corpses on the ground and you can detonate those. It's somewhat different, but it kind of has the same feel of like a bombing mechanic. So maybe if you're into Gazlowe, you may like Apuash. Zarya is somewhat close to Ares. Both have some sort of ally shielding. In Ares' case, it's an AoE protection aura. And both have an ultimate that pulls enemies together. In Ares' case, the enemies get pulled together around him instead though. Lurik and Cabrakan are in many ways different characters, especially since Cabrakan doesn't have any sustain, but both have an ultimate that traps people in some sort of area in front of them, which allows you to damage them very easily. Muradin is a lot like Fafnir as well, more than Alexstrasza in some ways when it comes to his base kit. For example, he's got the hammer stun and he's got the leap forward. So there is a lot of visual appeal here, also in the sense they're both dwarves as well. At the same time, he also gets a bit of a Vamana vibe, especially in the ultimate. His avatar form is somewhat similar to Vamana's ultimate, even though not quite the same. Nova, Zeratul, and Valera all kind of share traits with Loki in one way or another. They all, to some degree, revolve around stealth or burst, just a sudden surprise single target damage, and that is exactly what Loki brings as well, though Loki is not ranged. If you enjoy playing Brightwing, you may enjoy Athena as well. She can also teleport to allies, though her kit overall is more defense focused. She has taunts and she also has a decent amount of damage along with that and not healing focused. Hanzo has somewhat of a similar ult to Neith. In Hanzo's case, it's a global arrow that basically just goes across the map, but he has to aim it, whereas Neith just has to focus on a target with the ultimate and will hit automatically, and Neith cannot teleport to the arrow after firing it. Last but not least, Anubarak and Geb share some traits, for example, in terms of their knock-up mechanic and their movement forward and similar things. They do kind of feel similar in the sense that they have shields as well. In Geb's case, you can use a shield on other players as well, though visually, Anubarak is probably a lot closer to Beetle Capri. And that's it for the comparison. I hope this helps you out if you're considering to switch from Heroes of the Storm to Smite. If you enjoyed this, feel free to click the sub button and maybe the bell and it helps me out. And also feel free to check out Super Deza. His Twitter link and his YouTube link will be down below. He and his friend make skin spotlights for potential concepts for skins for Smite on Nom Network. So that's pretty cool. And also thanks to Valenice again, who you can also check out on twitch.tv/Valenice, and the link will also be down below. Other than that, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you all for the next one tomorrow. DukeSloth out.